Joining me now, Anthony Ruggiero, an expert in nuclear power. He is senior director at the Non-Proliferation and Biodefense Program and a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. So, Anthony, how do you react to new reports of fears about a leak and that officials near the plant are starting to hand out iodine pills?
Right. Last week I think we came the closest since March when the Russians took over the plant. I think Secretary Blinken, when he said that the Russians are using the plant as a nuclear shield because they know the Ukrainians are not going to fire back when the Russians fire toward the Ukrainians, it's really completely irresponsible on the part of the Russians.
And Russia, as we know, took control of that plant in March. The UN and international atomic energy officials, they have been trying for weeks to get in, inspect this plant. Just help us understand and grasp how real this threat is.
Well, last week, as was noted in the piece, when the reactor went offline from the electric grid, we basically had to make sure that, or the Ukrainians did, to make sure that diesel generators would kick in. Now, you have a staff that's been working nonstop since March, is stressed out. The Russians are intimidating them. They're torturing some of them. There are reports that they've killed some of those workers. This is a stressful job without that kind of stress on top of them. And now it looks like the Russians, hopefully we averted a disaster, and it looks like the IAEA is going to go in hopefully next week. What we really need is we need some kind of demilitarized zone around that nuclear power plant so that we don't go toward an ecological or humanitarian disaster. Right, and the threat still remains. Hopefully, that's, nothing will happen there, obviously, but in terms of a frame for a reference for a potential disaster there, what if you had to compare the threat to, say, Fukushima or Chernobyl? Help us better understand. Well, I think, there are 6 nuclear reactors here, right? It provided a fifth of the power for Ukraine before the war. You noted the passing out of iodine tablets. These are the kinds of things that those of us who work in this field, this is the nightmare scenario, and it can be prevented. It can be prevented, and it doesn't need to be this way. Nuclear power plants are not military bases. That's what the Russians are trying to use it as. It's not a military base. It shouldn't be a military base. It's not a pawn in a military conflict. It should be preserved and the people around, because it's not going to just be Ukraine. It would be other countries in Europe that would be at risk, other countries, probably Russia itself, depending on the winds. But hopefully we can avert that disaster. We never want to have these kinds of things. But, in this case, the other 2 you reference are accidents. This might be an accident, but would be caused by, negligence on the part of the Russians. Right now, only 2 of the plant's 6 reactors are currently functioning. They're protected by steel and concrete casing that's meters thick. One expert said it would be improbable that shelling could destroy it. Do you agree with that assessment? Well, the reactor hull is one thing, but there's other parts of the nuclear power plant that we have to be worried about. The cooling elements, as we talked about, being connected to the power grid, making sure the diesel generators that are probably quite old and have been under stress themselves through this ordeal, and we know that there are some spare parts issues. So it's not just the reactor hull itself. It's the entire complex. And so, the point here being that's why, as I noted, you don't use a nuclear power plant as a military base, even in a military conflict. Anthony Ruggiero, thank you so much.